The shot rang out across the dusty main street of Sweetwater Springs, cutting through the sweltering heat of the 1878 Wyoming Territory summer like a knife. Felicity Goodwin ducked behind a water trough, her heart hammering against her corset as bullets splintered the wood just inches from her head. This wasn't how she had planned to arrive in town, caught in the crossfire between the local sheriff and what appeared to be a band of outlaws. "Stay down, madam," a deep voice commanded as a tall figure dove beside her, his body shielding hers from the flying debris. Felicity found herself staring into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a battered Stetson. The stranger's jaw was strong, dusted with stubble, and there was a small scar just above his right eyebrow. "Thomas Ingram," he introduced himself quickly, tipping his hat despite the chaos. "Though most folks just call me Tucker." "Felicity Goodwin," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I only arrived on the afternoon stage." "Quite the welcome wagon we've arranged for you," he said with a hint of a smile before his expression turned serious again. "When I give the word, you run for that general store. Don't look back." Felicity nodded, gathering her skirts in one hand. Her other clutched the small valise containing everything she owned in the world. "Now," Tucker shouted, firing his revolver twice over the trough. Felicity ran, dodging between horses and frightened townspeople until she reached the safety of the general store. She glanced back just in time to see Tucker roll expertly across the dirt, taking down one of the outlaws with a clean shot to the shoulder. Within minutes, the sheriff and his deputies had the situation under control. 3 men lay wounded in the street while 2 others were being led away in handcuffs. Tucker holstered his weapon and walked toward her, his gait relaxed despite the danger they just faced. "You handle yourself well in a crisis, Miss Goodwin," he said, removing his hat to reveal thick dark hair. "Most city folk would have fainted dead away." "I'm not most city folk, Mr. Ingram," she replied, brushing dust from her traveling dress. "And I believe I have you to thank for ensuring I wasn't shot on my first day in Sweetwater Springs." "Just doing what any gentleman would," he said with a modest shrug, though his eyes sparkled with something that made her pulse quicken. "What brings you to our little corner of Wyoming? We don't get many unaccompanied ladies stepping off the stage." Felicity hesitated. The reason for her presence was not something she wished to advertise. "I've come to take over my late uncle's property, Gerald Goodwin. I was told he had a small ranch outside of town." Tucker's expression changed, a flash of recognition crossing his features. "Old Jerry was your uncle." "My condolences, madam. He was a good man." "Thank you. I never had the chance to meet him, but he was my mother's brother. When he passed without heirs, the property came to me." "The Double G," Tucker nodded. "About 5 miles north of town. It's not much, but the land is good." The sheriff approached them, a stocky man with a graying mustache. "Miss Goodwin, I'm Sheriff Holloway. Apologies for the reception. The Jenkins gang has been causing trouble all through the territory." "No harm done, Sheriff," Felicity replied politely. "I see you've met Tucker already," the lawman continued. "Best horseman and rancher in the county, though he's too humble to admit it." Tucker shifted uncomfortably at the praise. "I was just offering to escort Miss Goodwin to the Double G, seeing as she's Gerald's niece." "That would be greatly appreciated," Felicity said. "I confess I've no idea how to get there." "I'd be obliged if you would, Tucker," the sheriff agreed. "I've got my hands full with these miscreants." As they walked toward the livery stable to arrange for transportation, Felicity found herself studying her unexpected protector. There was something both dangerous and gentle about him, like a thunderstorm on the horizon, powerful but distant enough not to fear. "I hope this doesn't inconvenience you, Mr. Ingram," she said as he saddled a magnificent chestnut stallion. "Tucker, please," he corrected. "And it's no trouble. My ranch borders your uncle's property. We've been looking after his stock since he passed." "That's very kind of you." He helped her onto a gentle mare, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "Neighbors help neighbors out here, Miss Goodwin. It's how we survive." "Felicity," she offered in return, feeling a strange flutter in her stomach at the brief contact. As they rode out of town, the vast Wyoming landscape opened before them, rolling hills dotted with sagebrush, distant mountains purple against the sky, and endless open spaces that made Boston seem like a crowded cage by comparison. "It's beautiful," Felicity breathed, taking in the wild grandeur. "Different from back east, I expect," Tucker commented, riding easily beside her. Very, I've never seen so much. Nothing, he laughed, a warm sound that wrapped around her like a blanket. It's not nothing, Felicity, it's everything, you just have to learn how to see it. As they crested a hill, Tucker pointed to a small cluster of buildings nestled in a green valley. There it is, the double G. Felicity's heart sank slightly at the modest sight: a small cabin, a barn in need of paint, and a corral containing a handful of cattle and horses. This was what she'd gambled her future on. It's not much, she murmured, unable to hide her disappointment. Tucker studied her face. Your uncle wasn't a wealthy man, but he was honest. The land is paid for, the water rights secure, and the stock is healthy. That's more than most can say. They rode down to the cabin, and Tucker helped her dismount. The interior of the small home was simple but clean, with basic furniture and a stone fireplace. Mrs. Holden from town came out and tidied up when we heard you were coming, Tucker explained. There's food in the pantry and firewood stacked out back. Felicity turned in a slow circle, taking in what was now her home. It was a far cry from the townhouse in Boston, but it was hers, free and clear, unlike the life she'd left behind. Thank you, she said sincerely. I don't know what I would have done without your help today. Like I said, neighbors. Tucker shifted his weight, suddenly seeming uncertain. I'll stop by tomorrow to show you around the property if that suits you. That would be perfect. He tipped his hat and turned to leave, pausing at the door. It gets cold at night. There's extra quilts in the trunk by the bed. His eyes met hers. Welcome to Wyoming, Felicity Goodwin. After he left, Felicity sat on the edge of the bed, her bed now, and allowed herself a moment of doubt. She'd fled Boston with nothing but the clothes on her back and the small inheritance that had paid for her journey west. Behind her, she'd left scandal, heartbreak, and a fiancé whose betrayal still burned like acid in her chest. Could she really make a life here, alone in this wilderness? She had no experience with ranching, no knowledge of this harsh country. And yet, what choice did she have? She unpacked her meager belongings and prepared a simple meal as the sun set over the distant mountains. The silence was deafening after the constant noise of the city, broken only by the occasional lowing of cattle or nickering of horses. That night, she slept fitfully in her uncle's bed, dreams plagued by the faces she'd left behind, and one new face, a handsome cowboy with kind blue eyes who had appeared from nowhere to save her life. Morning came with golden light streaming through uncurtained windows. Felicity rose early, washing her face in the basin before changing into her most practical dress. She'd just made coffee on the small stove when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Tucker dismounted in front of the cabin, leading a second horse laden with supplies. Good morning, he called. Thought you might need a few things to get started. Felicity stepped onto the porch, coffee cup in hand. You're thoughtful, Mr. Ingram. Tucker, he reminded her with a smile. And it's selfish, really. I need you to succeed so I don't have to keep watching over this place. She laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd genuinely laughed? Well then, in the interest of relieving you of your burden, I'd be grateful for any instruction you can provide. They spent the morning touring the property. The Double G comprised 160 acres, small by Wyoming standards. Tucker explained, but with good grass and reliable water from a creek that ran through the northern section. Your uncle ran about 50 head of cattle and a small remuda of horses, Tucker said as they rode along the fence line. It's not enough to get rich, but it can support a person comfortably if managed well. And how does one manage it well? Felicity asked, trying to absorb everything. Tucker's ranch, the Circle T, was much larger, nearly 2,000 acres with several hundred cattle. He employed 4 ranch hands year-round and more during roundup and branding season. I could help you hire someone, he offered as they watered their horses at the creek. A foreman to handle the day-to-day operations. Felicity shook her head. I can't afford to pay wages yet. I'll need to learn to do it myself. Tucker raised an eyebrow. That's a tall order for someone who's never ranched before. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Ingram. I never suggested you were. His eyes twinkled. But there's hard work and then there's knowing what you're doing. Ranching isn't something you learn from a book. Then I'll just have to find a good teacher, won't I? She met his gaze steadily. A slow smile spread across his face. I reckon you will. Over the next few weeks, Felicity threw herself into learning everything she could about running the ranch. Tucker proved to be a patient teacher, showing her how to ride properly, not side saddle as she'd been taught in Boston. how to mend fences, check cattle for illness, and 100 other skills she'd never imagined needing. Every morning, he would arrive with the sunrise, often bringing something from his own kitchen: fresh bread baked by his housekeeper, Mrs. Larson, or preserves from last summer's harvest. They would work together until midday, when Felicity would insist on preparing lunch for them both. These shared meals became her favorite part of the day. Tucker would tell stories of growing up in the territory, of his father who had come west after the war and built the Circle T from nothing, of his mother who had planted the apple orchard before dying of fever when Tucker was just 12. In turn, Felicity gradually revealed pieces of her own past: her childhood in Boston, her father's shipping business, her mother's death 5 years earlier. But she never spoke of Bradley Thornton or the scandal that had driven her west. One evening, as summer gave way to early autumn, Tucker stayed later than usual to help repair the barn roof. The sky had turned a deep purple by the time they finished, stars beginning to appear like diamonds scattered across velvet. "You should stay for supper," Felicity offered, surprising herself with the invitation. "It's too dark to ride home safely." Tucker hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd be honored." They ate by lamplight, a simple meal of rabbit stew and biscuits. Felicity had improved considerably as a cook, another skill she'd had to learn since arriving. "You've come a long way in a short time," Tucker commented, accepting a second helping. "Not just with cooking. I've had an excellent teacher. You're a quick study." Most city folk wouldn't adapt half as well. Felicity looked down at her hands, once soft and white, now calloused and tanned. "I had motivation. There's nothing for me back east." Tucker studied her face in the golden lamplight. "You never talk about why you left." She stiffened slightly. "Some stories aren't worth telling. All stories are worth telling to the right listener." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of the growing connection neither had put into words. Felicity took a deep breath. "I was engaged to be married. Bradley Thornton, from one of Boston's oldest families. The wedding was to be the social event of the season." Tucker waited silently for her to continue. 3 weeks before the wedding, I discovered he had been involved with my closest friend, Margaret." Felicity's voice grew bitter. "Apparently, their arrangement was to continue after our marriage. When I confronted him, he seemed genuinely confused by my objection. Such arrangements were common in our circle," he explained, as if I were a child who didn't understand adult matters. "What did you do?" Tucker asked quietly. "I broke the engagement publicly at the Ashford summer ball. I announced to everyone present exactly why." A small, fierce smile crossed her face at the memory. "The scandal was enormous. Bradley's family used their influence to essentially exile me from society. No invitations, no calls, doors closed wherever I went. That took courage." "It wasn't courage so much as rage," Felicity admitted. "When I received the letter about Uncle Gerald's property, it seemed like providence, a chance to start fresh where no one knew me or my shame." Tucker reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough against hers. "There's no shame in standing up for yourself, Felicity. Your former fiancé is the one who should be ashamed." The simple touch and his words of support broke something inside her. To her horror, tears began to spill down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said, trying to withdraw her hand to wipe her face. Tucker held firm, passing her his own handkerchief with his free hand. "Don't apologize for honest feelings." Later, as he prepared to leave despite Felicity's concerns about the darkness, Tucker paused at the door. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "Boston's loss is Wyoming's gain." The simple compliment warmed her through the night. As autumn progressed, the work on the ranch grew more demanding. The cattle needed to be rounded up from summer pastures, counted, and prepared for winter. Tucker brought his men to help, teaching Felicity the intricate process of separating calves for market, treating any ailments, and ensuring the herd was healthy before the harsh Wyoming winter. One crisp October morning, Felicity rode out alone to check on a pregnant heifer Tucker was concerned about. She found the cow in distress, clearly struggling with a difficult birth. Panic gripped her. Tucker was miles away at his own ranch, and she had no idea how to help the suffering animal. Drawing on everything she'd learned, Felicity dismounted and approached the heifer carefully. The calf was coming wrong. She could see a single hoof protruding. Remembering Tucker's instructions from a similar situation weeks earlier, she rolled up her sleeves and prepared to do what needed to be done. An hour later, exhausted and covered in blood and other fluids she preferred not to identify, Felicity sat back on her heels and watched as the heifer licked her newborn calf. Against all odds, both mother and baby had survived. That was how Tucker found her sitting in the dirt, filthy and triumphant. "I came as soon as I saw your horse was gone," he explained, dismounting quickly. "I was worried about," he stopped, taking in the scene. "You delivered the calf yourself." It wasn't a question, but Felicity nodded anyway, too tired for words. Tucker knelt beside her, his eyes filled with something that made her breath catch. "Felicity Goodwin, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met." Before she could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her a gentle, questioning kiss that nonetheless sent heat spiraling through her body. His hand came up to cradle her cheek, thumb brushing away a smudge of dirt. When they broke apart, Felicity couldn't help but laugh. "I must look a fright." "You look beautiful," Tucker said with such sincerity that she believed him. Like a real rancher. The kiss changed things between them. Tucker began finding excuses to stay later to arrive earlier. Their work continued, but now it was punctuated by stolen kisses and lingering touches. Each evening it grew harder for him to leave, for her to watch him go. As November brought the first snows, Tucker arrived one morning with a wagon rather than his usual horse. "What's all this?" Felicity asked, gesturing to the load covered with canvas. "Winter supplies," Tucker explained, but there was a nervousness about him she'd never seen before. "And something else." He pulled back the canvas to reveal a beautiful rocking chair, its wood polished to a warm glow. "I made it," he said simply. "For your porch in the spring and by the fire until then." Felicity ran her hands over the smooth wood, speechless at the gift. No one had ever made something for her before. "It's beautiful, Tucker, thank you." He helped her carry it inside, placing it carefully near the fireplace. Then, instead of heading back out to work as usual, he remained standing in the middle of her small cabin, hat in hands. "Felicity," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I'm not a man of fancy words or grand gestures. I believe in speaking plain and living honest." Her heart began to race as she realized what was happening. "These past months, watching you build a life here, seeing your strength and determination, I've come to care for you in a way I never expected." He took a step closer. "I'm asking if you might feel the same, if you would consider becoming my wife." The proposal was simple, direct, just like the man himself. Felicity thought of Bradley's elaborate engagement with its calculated social advantages and expensive ring presented at the opera before hundreds of witnesses. This quiet moment in a humble cabin felt infinitely more precious. "I care for you deeply, Tucker," she said carefully. "But marriage is serious, especially out here. Are you certain?" "I'm still learning, still making mistakes." "I've never been more certain of anything," he answered. "And we all make mistakes. The question is whether we face them together or alone." Felicity crossed the small space between them and took his hands in hers. "Then yes, I would be honored to be your wife." The kiss that followed sealed their promise, and for the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Felicity felt truly at home. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church in Sweetwater Springs. The entire town turned out for the occasion. Tucker was well respected, and Felicity had gradually won people over with her determination and willingness to learn their ways. Sheriff Holloway gave the bride away. Mrs. Larson, Tucker's housekeeper, had baked a magnificent cake. Felicity wore a simple blue dress rather than white, feeling it more honest given her previous engagement. After the ceremony and celebration, Tucker drove them home to the Circle T in his wagon. The main house was much larger than Felicity's cabin, 2 stories with a wide porch wrapped around 3 sides. It wasn't grand by Eastern standards, but it was the finest home Felicity had seen in Wyoming. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ingram," Tucker said, lifting her down from the wagon. "What about the Double G?" Felicity asked suddenly. "My cattle, my uncle's land." "It's still yours," Tucker assured her. "We'll run them together as one operation. Nothing has to change unless you want it to." That night, as they prepared for bed, Felicity found herself growing nervous. Despite her previous engagement, she had been raised properly. Her virtue was intact, her knowledge of what happened between husband and wife limited to vague conversations with her mother years ago and whispers among married friends. Tucker seemed to sense her anxiety. He moved slowly, giving her time to adjust to this new intimacy. As he extinguished the lamp beside their bed, Felicity gathered her courage. "I've never shared a bed," she whispered into the darkness. Tucker's smile was visible even in the dim light from the banked fire. "Then tonight you'll share my heart too," he promised, taking her into his arms. Their coming together was tender, Tucker guiding her through initial discomfort with gentle patience until pleasure replaced pain. Afterward, lying in his embrace, Felicity marveled at how far she'd come from that Boston townhouse, not just in distance, but in understanding what really mattered in life. Winter settled over the Wyoming territory, blanketing the land in white. The days shortened, and much of their time was spent indoors. Tucker taught Felicity to play chess in the evenings. She taught him to read poetry, laughing at his initial resistance but glowing with pride when he began to appreciate Whitman and Emerson. They developed routines and rituals, coffee together at dawn, Tucker reading aloud from the newspaper that arrived weekly from Cheyenne, while Felicity mended clothes or worked on a quilt. They learned each other's bodies in the darkness, their passion growing rather than diminishing with familiarity. During a particularly fierce blizzard in January, they were confined to the house for 3 straight days. On the second evening, as they sat before the fire, Tucker cleared his throat nervously. "There's something I've been meaning to discuss with you," he said. Felicity set aside her sewing. "That sounds serious." "It is, in its way." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "I know we haven't talked much about children," the word hung between them. They had been married nearly 2 months, and while they had not taken precautions to prevent conception, neither had they specifically discussed the possibility. "I would like children," Felicity said carefully. "Someday, when we're ready," Tucker nodded. "I would too." "But there's something you should know." He took a deep breath. "My mother didn't just die of fever. She died in childbirth trying to give my father a second son. The baby died with her." Understanding dawned. "You're afraid?" "I've seen what childbirth can do, even with a doctor present." "Out here with the nearest physician in Cheyenne." He couldn't finish the sentence. Felicity moved to kneel before him, taking his hands. "Life comes with no guarantees, Tucker. Not in Boston, not in Wyoming. We can only make the best decisions we can with the information we have." "I couldn't bear to lose you," he admitted, vulnerability plain on his face. "And I would not want to leave you," she assured him. "But denying ourselves a family out of fear isn't the answer. We'll be careful. We'll plan for the best medical care possible when the time comes." He pulled her into his lap, holding her tightly. "When did you get so wise, Felicity Ingram?" "I learned from my husband," she murmured against his neck. "He's quite smart, you know, for a cowboy." That made him laugh, breaking the tension. Later that night, their lovemaking carried a new significance, not just an expression of their desire for each other, but an embrace of all the possibilities their union might create. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought rapid changes to the landscape. The snow melted into rushing creeks, wildflowers carpeted the hills, and new calves wobbled alongside their mothers in the pastures. Tucker and Felicity rode out daily, checking fences, moving cattle to fresh grass, and enjoying the renewal of the land. They had decided to combine operations completely, incorporating the double GTKS brand into the Circle T, and using Felicity's cabin as a line shack for the ranch hands during roundup. One bright May morning, as they sat on the porch of the main house drinking coffee, Tucker noticed Felicity's unusual quietness. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, reaching over to take her hand. She smiled, a secret sort of smile that made his heart skip. "I was just thinking that we should perhaps prepare the small bedroom next to ours." It took a moment for her meaning to register. When it did, Tucker nearly dropped his coffee cup. "Are you certain?" Felicity nodded, her free hand moving instinctively to her still flat abdomen. "Mrs. Larson confirmed it yesterday. She says I'm about 2 months along, which means we should welcome our child around Christmas." Tucker was on his knees before her in an instant, his face a mixture of joy and fear. "A baby, our baby. Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly unsure. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her hand. "Terrified, yes, but also happier than I've ever been." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer months. Tucker hovered constantly, insisting Felicity rest more and delegate tasks she'd previously handled herself. She complied with good grace, understanding his fears even as she chafed sometimes at the restrictions. By autumn, her condition was obvious to everyone. Mrs. Larson moved into the spare room to help with household duties, and Tucker hired 2 additional ranch hands to ensure Felicity wouldn't be tempted to take on work she shouldn't. "I'm with child, not made of glass," she protested one evening after Tucker insisted on carrying her up the stairs. "Humor me," he replied, setting her gently on their bed. "I need to feel useful," she softened at that. "You are useful and wonderful. And if you keep treating me like a porcelain doll for the next 3 months, I may have to shoot you with your own revolver." He laughed, placing a hand on her rounded belly. Duly noted, Mrs. Ingram. As her due date approached, Tucker arranged for Dr. Whitman from Cheyenne to stay in Sweetwater Springs. The physician would remain through December and January, attending to the medical needs of the town while being available when Felicity's time came. The first snow fell in late November, earlier than usual. Tucker watched it from their bedroom window, Felicity sleeping peacefully behind him. The white landscape reminded him too much of the winter his mother had died, and old fears resurfaced despite his best efforts. "You're brooding again," Felicity's voice came from the bed. She had awakened and was watching him with knowing eyes. "Just thinking," he defended weakly. "About your mother." It wasn't a question. Tucker returned to the bed, sitting beside her. "I can't help it sometimes." Felicity took his hand and placed it where their child was kicking vigorously. "Feel that? That's life, Tucker. Strong, insistent life." He smiled despite himself, marveling at the movement beneath his palm. "Stubborn like its mother, and its father," she countered. "This child is coming into the world with the best of both of us and all the love we can possibly give. That's what you should be thinking about." He leaned down to kiss her, once again amazed by the woman he'd married. "What would I do without you? Fortunately, you'll never have to find out," she promised. December arrived with bitter cold. The ranch settled into winter routines, feeding cattle, breaking ice on water troughs, maintaining the buildings against snow and wind. Tucker rarely left Felicity's side now, delegating most outdoor work to his foreman and hands. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire in the parlor, Felicity suddenly gasped and clutched her abdomen. "What is it?" Tucker asked, immediately alert. "I think—" She paused, breathing carefully through what was clearly pain. "I think our child has decided to arrive for Christmas." Tucker sprang into action, sending a ranch hand to fetch Dr. Whitman while Mrs. Larson helped Felicity to the bedroom they had prepared. By the time the doctor arrived, her labor was well established. "First babies often take their time, Mr. Ingram, doctor." Whitman advised, shooing Tucker from the room. "Try to rest. This could be a long night." Unable to sleep, Tucker paced the hallway outside their bedroom, flinching at every cry of pain from within. Mrs. Larson brought him coffee and tried to distract him with conversation, but he couldn't focus on anything but the woman beyond that closed door. The hours stretched endlessly. Midnight came and went. The new day, Christmas, began with no news. Tucker's fear grew with each passing hour, his mind conjuring terrible scenarios despite his efforts to remain positive. Finally, as dawn broke over the snow-covered landscape, a new sound pierced the silence, the lusty cry of a newborn. Tucker froze, hardly daring to believe it. The door opened and Dr. Whitman emerged, looking tired but pleased. "Congratulations, Mr. Ingram, you have a healthy daughter." Tucker's legs nearly gave out beneath him, and Felicity, tired but well, she handled it beautifully. The doctor clapped him on the shoulder. "You can go in now." The sight that greeted him as he entered the bedroom would stay with Tucker for the rest of his life. Felicity, pale but radiant, propped against pillows with a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up as he approached, her smile brighter than the morning sun. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Tucker sat carefully on the edge of the bed, peering at the small red face partly visible among the blankets. A tuft of dark hair, a perfect miniature nose, tiny fists clenched as if ready to take on the world. "She's beautiful," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "like her mother." "I thought we might call her Hope," Felicity suggested. "It seems appropriate." "Hope Ingram." Tucker tested the name, finding it perfect. "Our Christmas Hope." Felicity shifted slightly, making room for him to sit closer. "Merry Christmas, husband." "The merriest," he agreed, carefully putting an arm around her shoulders and marveling at the miracle they had created together. The years that followed brought changes to the Circle T. The ranch prospered under Tucker and Felicity's joint management, eventually becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. Hope grew into a spirited child with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. 2 years after Hope's birth, Felicity gave Tucker a son they named James after Tucker's father. A third child, another daughter named Elizabeth, completed their family 3 years later. Felicity never returned to Boston, though she maintained correspondence with a few friends who had stood by her during the scandal. Occasionally, newspapers from the East made their way to Wyoming, bringing news of Bradley Thornton's financial ruin following bad investments and gambling debts. Felicity felt no satisfaction at his downfall, only gratitude for the path that had led her west. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Tucker surprised Felicity with a trip to Denver, their first real vacation since marrying. Mrs. Larson, now a beloved grandmother figure to their children, promised to keep everything running smoothly in their absence. In their hotel room that first night in Denver, after attending the theater and dining at the finest restaurant in the city, Tucker presented Felicity with a small velvet box. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find a delicate gold locket. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a miniature photograph of their 3 children on one side, and on the other, a tiny picture of the 2 of them on their wedding day. "It's perfect," Felicity breathed, letting him fasten it around her neck. "Not as perfect as you," Tucker said, drawing her into his arms. "10 years ago, you came into my life like a whirlwind, and nothing has been the same since." "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, only half teasing. "Taking on a city girl who didn't know one end of a cow from the other?" "Never," he assured her, kissing her deeply. "Best decision I ever made." Later, as they lay tangled together in the unfamiliar bed, Felicity ran her fingers through Tucker's hair, now showing touches of silver at the temples. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding night?" Tucker smiled, the memory clear despite the passing years. "You whispered that you'd never shared a bed before, and you said I would share your heart too," she finished. "I didn't fully understand then what that would mean. And now," Felicity kissed him softly, "now I know it meant everything. Every joy, every fear, every triumph and sorrow, all of it shared. 2 people becoming something greater than either could be alone." "That's a fancy way of saying you love me, Mrs. Ingram," Tucker teased. "I do love you," she affirmed. "More today than yesterday and probably less than tomorrow." "That sounds about right," Tucker agreed, pulling her closer. "And I plan to keep sharing my heart with you for at least another 50 years. "Ambitious for a man your age," she teased back. "I've always aimed high," he replied with a grin. "Started the day, I decided to court the most beautiful, stubborn Eastern lady ever to set foot in Wyoming territory." As they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, Felicity reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had brought her to this moment. The scandal that had seemed like the end of her life had merely been the beginning of something far more precious than Boston society could ever have offered. She had found not just a home in this wild country, but a love strong enough to weather any storm as vast and enduring as the Wyoming sky itself.